Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? You guys all know this one, right? This is kind of classic Christian story, right? The classic Christian stuff that you remember from Sunday school. Like I grew up I didn't really grow up in the age of like VeggieTales. I was already kind of old by the time VeggieTales kind of came out. So, but VeggieTales did Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as Rack, Shack, and Benny. Right? Perhaps many of you had a Sunday school lesson where it was like a felt board, right? You had the felt board and you kind of went through the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Like Phil, they made you say Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego 1,000,000 times there, and you didn't stutter once on it. It's because we know these names. We know the story, right? Like we know that it's there because of our dear, dear Sunday school teacher that taught us on a felt board or a chalkboard or whatever type of medium they taught us the story. And we know it, right? The story was of this big, nasty king who put up this huge image and forced you to bow down and down to the image, or he was going to throw you into a big fiery furnace. But God's people held fast. And when the king wanted them to worship the image, they refused. Right? So the king lit a fire, and it was so hot that even those building the fire could not handle it and died because of the heat. And they threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fire. And they began to walk around in that fire unburnt. And King Nebuchadnezzar stood up, looked into the fire, and there were 4 people, not 3. And he said, "Oh my goodness, look at this." And one of them looks like the Son of God, looks like a son of God. And he yelled at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, "Come out of there!" Right? And the king said that their God was amazing. The end. Right? Did I tell it like you learned it in Sunday school? Like all that stuff, like pretty much, right? So here's the issue, is that's a good story to tell in Sunday school when our dear Miss Kirkpatrick or so, I don't know, whatever your Sunday school teacher's name was, that when she was telling it to little ears, that's a good story to tell to little ears. Now here's the problem though, is that we all have big ears now and we have little ear understandings of the story. Right? Like that's a lot of the problems. Oh, and listen, I get a lot of heat for doing stuff like this, but my goal in life is to take your little ears understanding of it and give you the big ears understanding of it, which is oftentimes a much harder, more difficult message. Right? Like so, and it's over there. So we're going to go through this story. We're not going to hit everything. If you want to hit everything, you need to come to Sunday school, right? And then you can really get upset at me, right? Like that's, but that's for you. That's a joke for the people who came to Sunday school today. But that's what I want to do. That's why, like I say things like Mary didn't ride a donkey into Bethlehem. That's nowhere in the scriptures. All right? So like then some of you are like, what? Like, yes, it was. Like, no, it's not there. Because I want you to read. You have big ears now. Some of you have really big ears, but that's all right. I'm not pointing any finger. I looked at the wall when I said that. I didn't look at anybody. But you have big ears now, and you have and so let's look at this with this big ear understanding, right? We're not children anymore. We're not children. And this story is difficult. And it's going to be hard on a lot of us, if not all of us. Because I swear this. This is what happened. Mark and I, the guy I write all my sermons with, sat down. We always discuss what the text is about from our own study. And he looked at me right in the eyes through our screens, and he said, "We can't preach that." Like that's how serious this is. That's how serious this is. So we're going to preach a version of it. And if you want to actually get it, you can read it for yourself. But I'm going to try to convey the message of what's going on in this incredibly familiar story, right? So, the king, Nebuchadnezzar, he has this vision in chapter 2. And those who were here last week, you remember the vision. He has this dream that Daniel comes and interprets to him. That is this dream of this huge image. By the way, it's using the word image, which is the same word in Hebrew that is used in Genesis chapter 1, when God looks at Adam and Eve and says, "In the image of God, I have created you." Right? The image of God has created you in His image. This is why He doesn't want us to worship other idols, because He has already perfected the image in us. And by us worshiping other idols, we are worshiping the created things rather than the Creator. That's to quote Paul there. We are worshiping those other things. And so in this dream that Daniel decodes for Nebuchadnezzar, there's this huge image that's massive, and it has a gold head on top of it. And that gold head represents Nebuchadnezzar in all of his power and glory and might, right? But there was a caveat to that dream. There was a stone that was not crafted by human hands, and it came and destroyed that image at the end of it, right? And what did that stone tell us, basically? Is that the kingdoms and the powers of the realms of men here is all temporary. It's all temporary, which is good news for if you are feeling the heat and the pressure and the bondage of those powers and kingdoms of men, right? That's very good news. So if you're having struggles with all of that, know that it's temporary. When the HOA wants to shut you down, it's temporary. I can't go there. It's a bad place for me right now. It's a bad place. It's a cheap joke. It's a cheap shot. No, it's all going to work out because of what Kevin said. That God, and listen, this has been my motto since the beginning of this whole building project. If it all goes away and we can't do it for whatever reason, we're in the same boat that we are right now. You know? So why not try? Why not try? You can't get any worse than we are right now. And it's all right looking at you guys, but we're fine, right? Like that's there's really nothing to lose. So we'll just go forward and we'll enjoy the ride as we get there, right? And we'll just follow God in any way we can go. So we see that the kingdoms and the powers of this world are temporary. But we see at the beginning of chapter 3 then that now Nebuchadnezzar erects a statue, or not a statue, an image that is all gold. What has he done? Now, it doesn't actually say what the image is. When you look at it, it never says an image of the king. It never says it's an image of a giant eagle. It never says it's an image of a giant brick that's huge and all that stuff. It doesn't say any of that. It says it's just an image. But it does say it's made out of gold. It's all the same language that he used in his dream. You see that? But what does he do? He doesn't faithfully create it. He makes it all about himself, right? He makes it all gold. And how tall is this image? It's 90 feet. It says it's 90 feet tall. So those that you know, do we have any structures in Port St. Lucie that are 90 feet tall? Does anyone know? I couldn't think of any. I couldn't think of. The Jensen Beach Bridge is 65 feet tall. And I ride over that quite a bit. That's tall. Like you get on top of that bridge and you're like, dang, that's tall. That's 65 feet, right? And so this thing is gold and it's 90 feet tall, right? It's 90 feet tall and it's and so it's huge. Now let's actually, I need to let the Bible nerds nerd out on their Bible stuff here for a second. What does the Bible actually say how tall it is? 60 cubits. If you guys are into the number stuff, what does 6 mean? Not quite there, right? Not quite bad. You guys know like the king of the bad numbers, right? It's in Revelation 666. Right? In 2 Kings, after Solomon starts going after the ladies a little more, with Queen of Sheba, he starts making his throne, and it's got like 6 steps up to the throne. It's got all these 6s are all of a sudden in the architecture. That's the author going, you see? Numbers in the Bible oftentimes are like emojis. You know what emojis are? I have to ask. Like, I don't know. Like that's it's like an emoji. So like a 6 is kind of a sad face kind of emoji type of thing, and all of that. And like a 7 is like a happy, good face, right? So that's kind of how they work. And this is huge because this huge 60-foot tall, 60 cubit tall, 90-foot tall statue, whenever they hear the music play, they make everyone get reverential towards it, right? They say, look towards the image and reverence yourself, right? Like that's scary. That's scary when he does that. But Rakshak and Benny, I'm quoting VeggieTales, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they don't make a big deal out of it. They don't make a big deal out of it. They don't really, they probably up just in their room. They don't like glang any gongs going, we're not going to do what Nebuchadnezzar is saying. Like they don't do that at all. They just refuse to bow down. Right? You see that? Let's read some Bible here. But then what happened is some of the politicians in the area who probably wanted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's sweet jobs that they had. Remember, they were working for the king. They probably wanted their sweet jobs. They're like, hey, we can get them in trouble here. It doesn't say that. I'm reading between the lines. But you can kind of see what's going on. They told Nebuchadnezzar about it. And how did Nebuchadnezzar take the news? Then Nebuchadnezzar was furious in rage and commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought. So they brought these men before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to the guys, is it true, guys, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I have set up? That image that I think displays power and prestige, all of that. You see that? Now, if you are ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, when you hear the symphony begin to play, right? Fall down and worship the image that I have made. I've made it well and good. But if you don't, guys, you shall immediately be thrown into that fiery furnace. This is the challenge right here. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands? This guy's so drunk on his power that he looks at them in the eyes and says, not even God can take you out of my power. Not even your God, no one. You are mine, basically, right? And whatever I decide to do to you, you have to do. No one, not even your God, can save you now. Unreal, right? So how do they respond to all this? So the guys, they answered and said to the king, "O king, we don't have to answer you on this matter. If this happens, I got to read this right. If this be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning, firing furnace. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up." What are they telling him? We don't care what you do to us. You have no power here. That's an amazing thing to say. What an amazing display of freedom, right? The God who has made him in his own image, and they are saying, we refuse to bow down to any other image of power or prestige or anything. We will not do that to display another form of power than the one God alone. We refuse to do that. And we believe that our God will save us, but even if he doesn't, we refuse. You have no power here, king. How does the king handle that, by the way? Does he go, "Oh, okay. Yeah, I get it. To each his own." Is that how Nebuchadnezzar deals with it? No. He's like, "What?" And I imagine he grabbed the first thing he could, if it was this, he grabbed it and just threw it to the ground. No, right? Like there's this power. Like he goes, and he threw him into the furnace. He goes, you're to the furnace with you. And he's so enraged, so angry that he makes the furnace, he orders the furnace to be hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. How much hotter did he actually make it? Do you remember? Anyone remember? 7 times. Remember we talked about the 6 earlier? What does 7 mean? 7's the good one, right? So it's almost like he is creating this holy fire, right? It's almost like he himself is creating God's own display of power and holding of his own people. Like he does that unwittingly. He's trying to decimate them in any way possible, and yet he is showing God is going to use this activity. Like, I love that man throughout all, we talked about this in Sunday school, I'm adding it now. We talked about, we did this. God always shows his power and his glory throughout time in ways that frustrate the powers of men. He always shows this, and he shows it here again. But what happens? He gets it so hot that he gets these guys that are described in the story as mighty men of valor. He gets his best soldiers to stoke the fire, right? He gets them, and what happens to them? Let's talk about that for a second. What does that say about a king? What does that say about a group of people that is fine with the best soldiers that they have dying so that the people they really want to kill can be killed? That's not a good look, is it? Is that honoring the image of God? I don't think so. I have to be honest with you guys. This is where this sermon gets difficult. Because when we looked at this sermon and we looked at what it was saying, we went, oh goodness. Oh goodness. Because this is the part that all of the children's stories don't tell. They don't make a big deal. That's always like, oh, the fire was so hot that people died. No. That's an important detail. People died so that they could kill someone else. And the part that I show a lot of videos throughout the week from a company called the Bible Project. And I was listening to their head theologian, it's a guy named Tim Mackey. I was listening to him talk about this. And after I heard him talk about it, I sat back and went, oh man, I am a man of unclean lips and I live amongst a people of unclean lips. And this is what he said, and it was about this part. He says, any leader, people group, or nation, they equate themselves with divine status when the human life, the image of God, is of no matter or concern. I'll say that again. Any leader, people group, or nation, they equate themselves with having divine status when the image of God, human life, is of no matter or concern. And I went like you know when you read something and you just start humming, you're just like zzz, like it's like oh goodness. Because we can go obvious ways with this, right? Because this is hugely distressing, because what we're talking about here is the value of life. We're talking about the value of life, and we are saying that our own image, our own power is more important oftentimes when we're willing to get rid of other human life. We're willing to lift up our own, we're willing to worship our own golden statues lifted up high and reverence ourselves in front of them, right? No matter what they are. We're willing to do that and sacrifice life. And listen, we can have all kinds of examples about that. You guys know which ones I'm going to go to. The easy one right off the top is abortion, right? I think many of us can agree with that right away. But also, you know where I'm going here. It's also the addicts that are underneath bridges that we don't care anything about. That those people matter just as much. And by us throwing them away, we are not valuing life, and we're ascending ourselves up to a divine status. Not to mention any amount of people who have troubled homelands that are seeking security. Right? Not to mention any times we have taken advantage of people of their own gain so that we can have more. We have raised ourselves up to a divine status because we denigrate human life. And as Christians, we look at all these situations that are around us and we go, no! Because we see the true image. The true image is right here. The true image is right there. That's the true image. That's where God is. In each and every one of us, whether we like them or not, they have the image of God. In any time as a people group or anything like that, when we denigrate someone else's image of God, we're lifting ourselves up higher than we should. And I fall into this too. I fall into the traps of our presidential elections where I go, I cannot believe someone would listen to that person. And if someone does, then they are subhuman. They are less than me. Right? We do this all the time. And as Christians, we have to say, no. I will not take part in that activity. I will honor the human life. I will honor the image of God because that is what God has made the whole time. Because God has come in and He has saved me, this diminished image. That He has come and He saved me from that. And then we saw, when we were crafting the sermon, we saw, I'm not to there yet. I'm going to be there now, though. And then we saw this in Colossians 1. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by Him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or all authority. All things were created through Him and for Him. You see that? For He is before all things, and in Him He holds all things together. And He is the head of the body, which is the church. You see that? The image is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that everything He might be preeminent. For in Him God was pleased to dwell. And through Him to reconcile all things to Himself, all things whether earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of His cross. You see that? The image of God, firstborn over all creation, reconciling everything to Himself to bring peace by His cross. Oftentimes when we're worshiping that power, when we're reverencing ourselves in power, we oftentimes get angry. And He brings us peace. Going back to where I was before. So they're in that fire, and Nebuchadnezzar looks down and he says, hey, didn't we throw 3 of them in there? Like, I see 4 guys. And they're just walking around in the fire and they're not hurt. And one of them has the appearance like the Son of God. And just in case you think this is all hogwash, at the end of it, Nebuchadnezzar's like, come on guys, come on out of there. And he's like, and he looks at him, he's like, you don't even smell like the fire. And he says, your guy's God is amazing. If anybody ever touches their God, I'm going to cut him into 1,000,000 pieces. You're supposed to laugh at that because it's ridiculous. Think about it. We've been talking about the honor of life, and the author of Daniel is like, hey, I want you to catch that. I want you to catch that this guy does not honor life. He's saying that the God is awesome, but he's still putting the God underneath him. He's still putting God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob underneath Babylon's rule, because he goes, your guy's God is amazing. He's so powerful and awesome. If anyone touches your God, I'm going to cut their head off. It's ridiculous, because he doesn't value life. He doesn't value the image. He has risen himself up above everything else. And what that reminds me of is when Jesus was on the cross, there was a Roman soldier underneath there, and all of a sudden the earthquake shook, the lightning bolts flared, and that Roman soldier said, truly this man was the Son of God. God's holy fire showed amount of truth, although we're seeing that Nebuchadnezzar's a little too far gone. I pray that I'm not too far gone. I pray that you're not too far gone. That you can see the value of human life in every circumstance. So my blessing for you today is that we would humbly stand for the image of God. Me and you. That we would see the glory of Jesus on the cross through your life, how you are reflecting that image of God. And he is the one that has rescued us. And Jesus has come to restore us to that true image. So Daniel 3 is hard. It's a difficult message for each one of us. And I can make it harder if you want to talk to me later about it this week. All right? But let's end right there, because God is rescuing us from all peril.